Joining us now, Steven Olikara, political analyst and partner with Builders Movement. Steven, always great to have you on the program. So as you well know, the Democratic Party, with a focus now on uniting, we saw Haley Stevens embracing Abdul El-Sayed, hugging him, rooting him on to victory against Mike Rogers. Rogers, for his part, saying this: he's not just another Democrat, speaking about El-Sayed here, he's an extremist and he doesn't represent a vision for the future. However, right now we have El-Sayed favored to win this race, according to DDHQ, despite those electability concerns before he secured this primary. So is this the best way for Republicans to hit back?
Well, first, thanks for having me, Keleigh. Always great to see you. And yes, first of all, Pete Buttigieg appearing in this way is a unifying moment for the Democratic Party. And it's a good look, frankly, for him as he looks ahead to 2028. And I would agree with the DDHQ prediction here, with Abdul El-Sayed being slightly favored in the general election. Mike Rogers is a very strong Republican candidate as well. I think had Haley Stevens won the primary, she would be even further ahead in these prediction markets. But Abdul El-Sayed, according to local Michigan reporters who have been following politics for decades and decades there, say that El-Sayed is one of the most talented political athletes they've seen. And so a lot of times we view politics in a transactional lens, but what Abdul El-Sayed is doing is seeking a more transformational politics, and he's found a way to authentically speak to not just working class issues, but also to some of the more troubling tweets that Democratic socialists have put out often in the last few years. He's found a way to navigate those issues. So I think this is a unifying moment for the Democrats.
Understood. You know, he has made a lot of those comments seem more palatable in various conversations. I wanted to ask you also, because you are a Wisconsin resident, another test in State Representative Francesca Hong. She's now a gubernatorial candidate, Democratic frontrunner. Hong, in the past, though, has called to defund the police, among other controversial items. So what would it mean for the party if she does, in fact, secure the Democratic nomination next week in a key swing state to know?
It means that all of these problem tweets that she's had since putting out, since being in public life, will be fair game and will be asked in every interview. You know, my message to Francesca, who I've known for several years, is welcome to the big leagues. No softballs here on out. And this is a different story than Michigan, because what Francesca has been challenged with, as she's done her first round of national TV interviews over the last couple of weeks, is suddenly she's talking about Thanksgiving, because she'd called to cancel Thanksgiving. She's called to abolish the police and defund prisons. And now she is kind of flip-flopping on these positions, and it undermines one of her core assets that she's always had since she got elected in 2020, which was her authenticity. The way that she's gone from she doesn't like Thanksgiving and now it's her favorite holiday, and going down the list of these problem tweets, it undermines her authenticity. And that's going to be a challenge in the general election, because we're expecting a blue wave. But here in Wisconsin, I think it's going to be a real toss-up. In fact, Francesca, in the primary election, according to polling, is, I believe, the only Democrat predicted to lose the general election. So she's going to probably win the primary, but really tough road ahead in the general.
Well, that's fascinating insight on that micro level. I want to pull the lens back out, because you have top Democratic strategists like James Carville, David Axelrod. They have repeatedly warned party leadership about electability with far-left candidates. So will we see a reckoning when some of these candidates go head-to-head with Republicans come November? Or is the party and the public becoming increasingly comfortable with these positions that were once viewed as extreme?
Well, first, we have to take into account that the primary electorate is whiter, wealthier, more partisan, and usually about half to a third of the size of the general election electorate. And so what may play well now in these primary elections may not work well for a swing purple state like Wisconsin when you get to the general election. So it's going to certainly impact the national narrative. Wisconsinites always seem to find ourselves in this position of shaping national politics, and it's going to be, I think, a battle not just between far left and the middle, but really a battle of who can best deliver their message in the most authentic way versus people who seem inauthentic and triangulating and poll testing. And one reason why these anti-establishment candidates generally have done well is that they seem to be speaking more to everyday people. But for the DSA candidates, I think one challenge going forward, if you look at the polling, they're not actually attracting as many working class voters as some of these more moderate candidates. So can you be a champion for the working class without the working class as your base? They're going to have to bring them into the general election to ultimately win.
So do you believe that's what's giving El Sayed in Michigan that edge? I know we were talking about that a little bit earlier because that was the big fear with him being the Democratic nominee, that he wasn't going to be able to pull it out in the general election. Now we're seeing the numbers saying otherwise, although, polling is just a snapshot in time, as you well know. Is it really his political know-how that's getting him those numbers? What would you attribute to what we're seeing in the polling?
I think, for some of the more left-wing extreme positions, those are positions and frankly, a language that you would hear in a very blue college town like in Ann Arbor in Michigan or Madison in Wisconsin, but it's not the kind of language that resonates across the state. So it really becomes a question of who's going to be the best communicator of their agenda. And so far, I've seen the evidence that Al Sayed has that ability. I think it's still a question for Francesca Hong in Wisconsin. I think for voters who are now just going to be tuning in to the general election fight, they ultimately want to know who's going to fight for them on their pocketbook issues and actually address the affordability crisis we're seeing right now. And so that's going to be on Al Sayed to highlight what he's for in terms of that agenda, but also say how the Trump administration has been driving up costs. That's his challenge going forward.
Right. And we've seen time and time again that being the crux of so many of these elections, that affordability piece. I wanted to ask you about South Carolina, too, and the passing of Lindsey Graham. This is the first time a Senate seat in South Carolina has been up for grabs in more than a decade. And it is a Republican stronghold. The Republican field, though, it is growing. It's a now crowded field. Do you think this will be a test of the president's endorsement power? He's thrown his support behind Graham's sister, Darlene. Or do you see this more as a sentimental move instead of a calculated endorsement made solidly on political grounds?
This is President Trump's race in many ways. This is his endorsement, and his involvement in the race is going to be the number one driving factor in the South Carolina Republican primary. And it looks like it's going to be a competitive election. It appears it won't be just a coronation of Senator Graham's sister, Darlene Graham. And I think she has already sought to position herself as not the national security person that Lindsey Graham was, but instead speak to these affordability issues that are more cross-cutting, I would say, and have a little bit more of a local feel as opposed to national security. That's sometimes hard for people to fully internalize. So ultimately, it's all about Trump's endorsement in this primary. Lindsey Graham, over the years, as having a little bit, some moderate streaks to him, has been a political survivor in some really tough elections. But now that he's gone, his brand, his seniority is gone, it really will come down to President Trump's endorsement.
Well, fascinating insights. Steven Olikara, always great to see you. I'm sure we'll be chatting soon. Thank you.
Thank you, as always.